I think from the perspective of the history, the Chapman family goes back up to about 160 years ago. And the Chapmans have been coming to this church and have been married in this church and baptized in this church since about that time.
Yeah, I think Mom and Dad met here. They were married here. My mom, Dorothy Chapman, was very active in many different groups here. I think, you know, Mom's dad, Lou Hall, his wife Lil, they were active members of the choir. Our grandparents on my dad's side, Tom and Carrie Chapman, very, very involved. Dad and John Bassett wrote a history, didn't they, of the church?
Yeah, they wrote one of the histories in the 50s, 60s, that version of the history. It's interesting because back like when we had our 2nd century celebration, Mom made a donation in memory of her parents who had, and her stepmom who had come to this church and sung in the choir, but also in terms of our grandparents. And I think that speaks to that richness of the history and the commitment.
I was just thinking of one other thing, and that's the meditation garden.
Yeah.
And when Mom died, we really thought about what we should do to honor both her and Dad, and you know, the Chapmans before, and the meditation garden seemed like such a perfect solution because our dad just loved to garden. Mom was very contemplative, and I know some people called her calm, which always made Dad laugh, but it really was a perfect memory and memorial for them and for what this church meant to them.
The meditation gardens they are a wonderful tribute to Paul and Ann's mom and dad. But there are times Paul and I laugh because we think probably their dad would say, now why would you spend your money on this? You could be doing something else with that money. On the other hand, it's a tremendously peaceful, calming place.
Yeah.
And when we're working there, it's hard to believe that we're in the middle of a busy city. I'm a relative newbie to St. George's Church. I started coming here in 1979. I was certainly made to feel very, very welcome. I think when I think about St. George's, I've heard many, many stories from Paul and Ann's mom and dad, my in-laws, and about how rich it was for them. And I think about the sense of community that this church provides for us, and that sense of belonging.
I was baptized here in March of 1951, confirmed in June of 1963, and when Peter and I were getting married, I chose to come back to St. George's in December of 1986. And then when he died in 2013, his ashes came back here and his committal service was here. For me, I came back to St. Catherine's in August of 2016 and came back to St. George's. At that time, because of family history, but I've stayed here because of the fellowship, the community, the sense of purpose that it's given me, and that all comes from the leadership, Canon Martha, Reverend Scott, and Reverend Michael.
I think St. George's, for me, offers hope. It offers hope based on faith.
Right now, St. George's really exemplifies the combination of tradition and change. And the tradition in terms of worship, the tradition in terms of the buildings, there's a permanence, a rock solidness to St. George's. The other side is that we are in a changing world, and St. George's is changing and adapting to that change to open that richness up to others. And I think it's incredibly exciting to see how we've been able to welcome so many newcomers in the last 3 years, how we have been enriched by the presence of new members. And I think from talking to them, their life has been enriched by our traditions.
I think the other thing that really strikes me about St. George's is the sense of joy. That it's okay to laugh here. It's okay to tell stories. And when we do a coffee hour or a soup Sunday, there's such a sense of joy that people just enjoy each other's company. I know we had a guest preacher here a few weeks ago, and he commented on that sense of community, that sense that people were talking to each other, and the sense that people had a number of choices, including the kinds of soups.
We need to be proud of our history, and we need to celebrate our history, and I think it's a special time for us to share in our time, our talents, and our treasures, to celebrate this great history of the church. But I think we also need to reflect on how the church evolved, and thinking back to the community where it started, and thinking how that community changed, and how the church continued to change because of how the surrounding community was changing, and how the people that were coming to church were changing. And I think it's very, very important that as the church continues to grow into the future, that we know we have, as Paul said, this sort of rock solid building for worship, but we also remember that a large part of this is how we show our faith, obviously in the church, but we show it in the church community, but how also we show it in the much broader community that we are part of. And as I say, look back to that history of how we evolved and how we came to be, and never forget that as we move forward.
But we also need to make a place here in the community. The things that we do out of this church to help those who are less fortunate is a sign of God's love. Whether it's space that we make available for AA groups, or whether it's the community breakfast program, and the other things that we do as part of our normal outreach. I think it's really important that if the church is going to prove its worth to the community, that it continues and it accelerates those efforts. Because I think it's through those efforts and the demonstration of what God's love and caring is what will attract others to come and help to secure the future. And I think we can be very proud of what we've done and what we've accomplished, but we can't rest on our laurels. We need to continue to move forward and tackle the problems that we see in the world around us and try and make a difference. Because if we don't do that, then I don't think we're living our beliefs. So if there's a message, I think it's get on with it.
A message, though, is for people to get involved. There's a place where people can use those time, talents, those resources, but that there's a place for every person that comes here.
Yep.
I think there's really a place here for children. And a few Sundays ago, I was watching this dear gentleman, I think is an older gentleman, interacting with a little child. And I must say, I was so touched. But the look of joy on that little face, that somebody was really given their all to hearing what that little one had to say. But I think the church is working hard to involve children, and again, trying to use children's time, talent, and resources as well, with the support of their families.
And I think children, when you think back to our childhood here, Paul, and
That was in the last century.
Yes, it wasn't. Well, maybe for me, but anyway, no. When you think back, and Little Helpers, our Sunday school. I mean, I remember my Sunday school teachers. And that brought such a life to the church, because children will be children. And it makes it so natural to have children in church, to have children, but just being children. And it's a spirit, and it brings smiles. You can't help but smile. You can't help but smile. And I think that's really, really important, that the children's programs continue to grow, and we've got such great leadership with the music and the programs that are offered for children. We just need to continue to support them in any way we can.